Hey folks, welcome to SJGames Live. I am Jimmy, and today we are going to be doing a Car Wars deep dive on the weapon types that you can find in Car Wars 6th edition. Um, Welcome back, everybody. Today we have a member of the Car Wars team with us. Will, the Car Wars line editor, is joining us today. Hi, Will.
Hello.
So in Car Wars, if you're not familiar with 6th edition Car Wars, we build cars based on point values, which we buy equipment with, weapons, equipment, everything else. And so you can fully customize your cars with all of these cars. What we're going to be looking at specifically today is weapons and the basic categories those weapons break down into. So most items in Car Wars, if you look at the cards, we'll throw one up here. See. If you look at the cards, right below their name here, there's a small bar that has the type of card and any subtype. So this is a weapon sonic subtype. So we're going to be looking at those different subtypes of weapons today as what we go through, because that kind of breaks down. Each have their own strategies and purposes behind them. So away. And that's going to be the focus of what we're doing here. So there's originally in the base set, there's several types, but there's four, to me, main core types. We've got let's see if there's not too many reflections on here. Yeah. We've got shred, we've got fire, we've got slug, and where's my rockets, my blast weapons? Pull one of those out here. Is there one of a comparable? There we go. There's a standard rocket. So, and our blast weapons. So these are kind of our four original basic types. Let me show these around a little bit. Would you agree with that? Well, those are kind of our four core types in the base set.
Yeah, those are the four things you're gonna see in that starter set when you open it. Every player's gonna have the same set of cards in their color to quickly organize things, and then you're gonna not see the more exotic, stranger things in that core set. So these are the four most basic.
Right. And so let's start with the shred weapons, because those are pretty easy. Like those are your machine guns. So we got a shred weapon here, and these are all 2 to 3 pointers. So these are all low to mid range weapons. Um, the hallmark, I can get that word right. The hallmark of a shred weapon is generally that wrenches on the weapon will convert wrench results when you roll the dice for the weapon will become tire damage. And so, in almost all the dice that they have, like in this case, the red die and the white die both have the chance to roll wrenches on their die faces. So that's sort of like most of your shred weapons are going to have that to some degree. Some die that can produce wrench results, and the wrench will equal tire damage. The
Yeah, it's
one,
very important. It's very important to know. This comes up other times, especially if you look at that slug weapon right there. The wrench is a wild. It means what it means if it has a rule. If you're rolling the dice and you're not, and there's no applicable wrench rule, that wrench is a blank.
right? Yeah,
So
it's effectively a
for
non-result.
example, you are rolling two reds in that slug, but it doesn't have a wrench result, so the wrenches don't mean anything.
Right. So that's not where I want to put this over here next to the other weapon. So yeah, one that comes up a lot in our demos that we throw on is this light machine gun, right here, which is a 1 point version as opposed to the heavy machine gun we've got there. This one just rolls 2 dice, and people go, "Oh, well, that's not very good. There's only 1 hit result on it." If it wasn't a shred weapon, you'd be correct. But that black die has 1 miss, one shield, 1 hit, and 4 wrenches on it. So with this 1 point weapon, you are almost certainly going to get like 5 out of 6 chance for each die wrench results. So that's going to be 2 tire damage. Um, and the important thing about the short weapons doing tire damage is while tire damage is blocked by defense rolls, like if they roll shields, it doesn't go at any particular side of the car, though. So once you get to their armor, it's not going to hit their armor, it's not going to hit their structure, it's going to the tires. So a lot of cases, if you're focusing on shred damage, your goal is to get those tires stripped away from them faster than everybody else in the match, and cause them maneuvering problems, cause them to be slower targets, get fewer speed dice later, and generally just causing those sorts of issues as your strategy. You're going a primarily shred strategy, right?
One of the other important things to think about is, we'll talk about this more when we get to slug weapons, but there are 2 kinds of weapons in each category. There's a more reliable weapon, and then there's a more of an iffy weapon. So that 1-point light machine gun is a great example of the reliable version of that 1-point machine gun.
Yeah,
You've only got 2 blanks on those 2 dice total. So you're going to average 2 damage really often with that dice roll, and you're going to average tire damage really often as well because there's so many wrenches on there.
right.
The other
Now,
1-point machine gun has a yellow die, so it has the possibility of getting a double, but that yellow die has no wrenches. So its single black die and single yellow die can roll higher, but they won't roll as much consistent tire damage. So that's the choice you're making between those 2 different 1-point weapons when you're building at that. And there are other spots along the points progression in the shred weapons that does that, where there's 2 weapons of the same cost, and one of them might potentially have the chance of doing more damage, but the other one's going to be more reliable against tires.
right, right. And that one pointer, it's not a huge bonus because you are almost always going to get those 2 wrench results. Now you still have to get through their defense rolls. So early game, it's not going
Yeah.
to seem great because they're probably making defense rolls if they're going, especially if they're going fast. But the more often you land hits with your shred weapons, the slower they're going to go, the fewer dice they're going to have, and dice is really their only defense against shred damage. Well,
Yeah.
unless they've built specific things onto their car, accessories, and things
Also,
like
the
that.
more likely they are to be out of control. And you
Right.
always want to shoot out of control targets, because unless they have dice from a structure or a driver or something, they're not rolling any defense dice, so they can't block. You get whatever successes you get against them, and there's nothing to block it.
Exactly. And once they're out of tires, these weapons are still effective because shred damage, if you do shred damage to them and they have no tire damage points left, it just converts to normal damage on whatever side you attacked, and becomes just like a normal hit at that point. So it's not like these weapons become ineffective once they're out of tires. Uh,
The other thing
so
I always like to point out when we're
mhm,
talking about low points cost
yeah,
is the damage cards. When damage goes internal on your car, it looks for card types. So things like accessory or structure or driver or whatever. When it comes to weapon, if you have 3 weapons on the side of your car, you get to apply that damage to whatever weapon you want. So if you have a big crazy weapon that you want to keep alive longer, sometimes putting a 1-point weapon on the same side is basically just adding 2 hit points to the big weapon that you want to save.
yeah, yeah. Uh, and the other thing is having options is always good. Like if you've got someone who you're targeting and you know they're at a break point of losing more of another speed reduction or losing some more control if they go down any more on the tires, you can forego that large shot and go for the reliable tire shot instead. So a lot of good things you can do. Shred is among the top damage types I like to work with because it is not just damage, but it also affects their control, affects their speed, which affects their defense and being out of control. And it's all around one of my favorite categories of weapons to use personally.
Yeah. Now, the other thing we need to talk about in the general sense, but we can talk about it now because it applies, is there's also sometimes a subcategory inside the weapon type.
Mm-hmm.
So these are shred weapons,
Right.
but range is another dial we turn when it comes to how powerful a weapon is for its cost.
True.
So we
True.
have a whole mathematical formula that says this many points equals this much potential damage. And the other thing to keep in mind is a weapon that's 1 point versus a weapon that's 3 points. That 3 point weapon is not 3 times better than that 1 point weapon.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is a gradual scale where the highest, the average damage and the highest maximum damage from the roll goes up, but it does not go up like
It's not
doubling and
linear. Yeah.
doubling and doubling.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a non-linear curve because we don't want the 8 point weapon to be 8 times better than the 1 point weapon.
Yeah. Yeah. Just
But
across the board, there's a curve, and there is kind of a plateau where there are diminishing returns when you get up into really high point cost values. You can get higher
yeah,
maximums and things like that, or higher reliabilities, but you start paying more for smaller increases as you go up after a point.
but one of those other dials we turn is the range. So
Yeah.
there are some shred weapons that are themed around a shotgun type attack where they only have a range of 2, but since they are limited in their range because the shred weapons we've talked about so far have infinite range effectively. Most guns in the game have infinite range. They can shoot as big as the arena is. But yes, things like that pepper mill, that's effectively a shotgun type
Because
weapon.
it's got a range of 2 here, so it actually has a limited range of 2 car lengths.
Yeah,
But and it's
so
got it
you'll
only costs
notice
1, so it still has 2 dice damage, but it's got a built-in hit of damage, and then that white die has double results on wrenches and on hits,
Mhm.
and then the red die has hits and wrenches on it. So you could spike as high as 4 hits
Yeah.
or wrenches, 4 hits or
And
3 hits and a wrench, or
and that
3 wrenches and a
automatic
hit.
success, that star is pushing your average up
Yeah,
by 1. So it's possible on the light machine gun to roll 0. If you roll both the shields on those black dice, which is highly unlikely, you get 0 on your attack. You
right.
can never roll a 0 on the pepper mill because it has 1 built-in success. So no
Yeah,
matter how bad your dice roll is, if you're within
it's
range 2 of your target, you're going to be throwing 1 damage at them that they have to deal with.
exactly. And then potentially up to 1 and 3 tire damage or 4 damage.
Yeah.
I like to use the peppermill as my anti tailgate device personally. Um,
Yeah.
I throw that on the back because people are behind you. They're often trying to get right behind you for something, and
Mhm.
they get where they're trying to swing around you or something like that. And they usually do it at a pretty close range. So I like to use the peppermill as something to throw. I don't often put a lot of guns on my rear facing personally, uh, but a 1 pointer like that is a really good like, hey, get off my tail kind of thing. Because the consistent damage and the spikes that it can do for a
Yeah.
single point.
And if you're driving a car that is safer to drive faster and is safer to be more maneuverable with,
Mm-hmm.
then you also get more out of those 2 point and those range 2 weapons because you can be generally where you want to be a little easier than a car that's not being able to re-roll their driving rolls and isn't, Thundercat boosting or something else to get that little bit of extra movement.
Yeah. Yeah.
So often you have to build your car to be a little bit more aggressive and maneuverable to use your 2 point weapons to full effect. But when you do get in range, they hit much harder.
Yeah. Not that if you can get up on people. And here's the other thing with that is if you're shredding their tires and they're slower, it's easier to get on them and stay on them if they
Hmm.
have lower maximum speeds than you do and less control than you do. So you can maybe have a couple longer range ones to start ripping those tires off of them, and then once you are able to just stick on them because they can't get away from you, then you can roll out the closer range ones that are going to be spiking more reliably. And it doesn't have to be a close range shred weapon because a lot of the shotguns and stuff are really powerful for their point cost because they are range limited, or like some of the
Hmm.
flame weapons are similarly the same. So it's a good combo strategy to use your shred weapons to hamper their speed and maneuverability enough that you can stick on them and stay, and then follow up, plan your mid to late game answer to be short range weapons that are just much more likely to be able to get in there and tear them up with heavier hits.
Yeah, these range 2 weapons also benefit from having just a little bit of scenery in the arena. If you're playing in a completely open parking lot and you're moving early, then you have a lot less knowledge about where people will be. But if you have a couple of things, some walls or barriers or whatever out in the arena, and you can kind of guess what people are going to have to do when they're moving after you, then you can have a little bit more knowledge of, well, this is the best place to position myself so that I have a chance for this range 2 weapon to work if I am early in the turn order and I have to move before the players.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but like I said, is there anything else like range combos well with that stuff because you can uh, basically shrink the arena size because they just can't get away from you as much. So it's a good
Yeah.
combo with uh, that, or if you're planning to be if you're planning to be a high speed, high maneuverability build yourself, you can lean into that advantage that you're building yourself with by also taking it away from other people, making that gulf wider. Um, of just being like you've built this high, like you built yourself for your defense to be speed maneuverability, and then your offense is designed to make that gulf wider by taking it away from everybody else by shredding the tires.
Yep. And the last thing to really talk about is there is a driver for, I mean, a gunner for each weapon type,
Yep.
especially now that the expansions are coming out. So
Mm-hmm.
Machete is a fairly cheap gunner um, in one of the sets that adds a black die to every shred attack. So Machete is upping the reliability and damage of all of your shred weapons. So if you focus heavy on shred weapons, you probably want to also spend that 2 crew points to put Machete in that car.
Yeah, because that brings everything, even the low point ones, up to mid range weapons
Yeah.
easily. Uh,
There are other ways to add dice and to add rerolls, but Machete is adding a kind of reliability, especially if you're focusing on the strategy of taking out tires, that really
yeah,
pushes those shred weapons
because
to
he's
do
adding another one
even
of
more of
those.
what they're doing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because he's adding another one of those black dice, which only has one bad result on it if you're using it on a shred weapon.
Yep. You have
Everything
a
else,
2 and 3 chance of getting tire damage off that die.
exactly, and a 5 and 6 of doing damage at all.
Yep.
So yeah, he's Machete's really good to pair if you're focusing a shred build. Um, really good crew member for that because that just scales up. It's almost like adding an automatic hit. It makes that light machine gun 3 black dice. That's a really pretty good 1 point weapon at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you add anything else onto it with any of the other enhancers. I think we're going to go ahead and move types. If people have questions about Shred, feel free to ask and we can revisit it. The type I want to go to next is our slug weapons. So let me pull a few of these off of here.
So slug weapons, while Jimmy's doing this, slug weapons are kind of the baseline. Slug weapons generally don't have any wrench results. So you're
Right.
only looking for stars on their rolls. So you're not like doing any kind of gambling of maybe I'll light you on fire, maybe I'll hurt your tires more than anything else. It's just a straight damage roll. The other thing about slug weapons, like I talked about with shreds, how there's reliable shreds and more spiky shreds, the slugs lean into that a lot. If
Yeah,
you look at
that's the main
2
feature
slug
of slugs
weapons,
to me.
yeah, if you look
Is
at 2 slug weapons that have the same cost, you'll find one that has automatic damage and a dice roll, and you'll find one that has more dice. Usually still an automatic success or 2, but more dice because those more dice will potentially do higher damage. So when you're looking at slugs, you're looking at, do I want to do consistent damage like that jackhammer all the way on the right? If you bring that jackhammer, that black die is only adding a damage 1 in 6 times. So you're averaging 3 in general
yeah,
because you're
it
getting 3
occasionally
successes.
spikes to 4, but you just get 3. You fire it, you roll 1 die to maybe get a bonus damage, but you're getting 3.
Yeah, but the standard recoilless always gets 1 success, then can get 2 more on that yellow 1 in 6 times, and can get a couple more from the red, but the red's not a very reliable die when you're looking for stars.
Right. Yeah, it's only got 2 hits, I believe.
Yeah, it's only got 2 stars. So it's got 3 shields on it. So it's gonna roll shields half the time, and it's got a wrench, and this card doesn't have a wrench effect on it, so that's also effectively a blank. But you do get that 1, you just have the potential of getting up to 4 damage, and you're paying 1 less point than the jackhammer at 3 points for the potential of the same amount of damage if you're rolling the dice.
Exactly. And I think
Well, and
you
if you
can
have
see it.
rerolls and things you can add to it, yeah.
You can see it really well at the top end of the spectrum with the
Yeah.
2 8-pointer slugs. The Devastator is your high spike weapon, right? It's got 2 hits that you're going to hit, but you're rolling 3 reds, 2 blues, 2 whites. Which let's see, it's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So you're maxing out at 11 damage there.
Yeah.
But again, the 3s are unreliable, the 2s are 50-50, the whites are pretty good. So you're looking at like what, about 3 or 4 to 11 on that one.
So, on that one, your average is 5 according to
5.
my spreadsheet.
Okay. And then versus the next one, you've got the Dreadnought, which does 4, and then you've got the 50-50 on the blue and a pretty good result on the white. So I imagine that one is probably a 5.5 to 6 average.
That one is a 5 on average too.
It's
So they're
also 5.
both roll. So you're paying 8 points for 5 average damage.
Got it.
It's just, do you want to sometimes go less than that and sometimes go higher than that, or do you want to be much more consistent?
Like the Dreadnought, you'll very rarely, like you're going to get 4.
Yeah.
You're going to average 5, but your max is only going to be 6, 7. Your max is still going to be 8 on the Dreadnought. So it's 4 to 8, but pretty reliable in that range.
Your max
4 to
is
8,
your
average
max is
5.
7.
Is it 7?
Your
1,
max is
2,
7. There's
3.
only 1 success on a blue and 2 on a white.
Yeah. So 4 to 7 with an average of 5 on the Dreadnought. So not a wide range, but averaging 5. The Devastator averages 5, but you could only get 2. Like your bottom of your range on that one's 2, and the top of your range on that one is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So it's like 2 to 11 is your range, average 5, or 4 to 7 is your range, average 5.
Yeah. And also, this is gonna influence your other choices, right? If you're building your car and you're taking the Devastator, the advanced firing interface to get a reroll on every one of your attacks is much, much better than on the Dreadnought, because the Dreadnought, it'll help, right? Rerolling that blue die because it's a 50-50 will always be good. But since that Devastator and that firing interface interaction lets you pick the die you roll, that means when you get higher, you might even get a little bit higher, and you have that much, much higher ceiling to go for when you're rolling a Devastator. So it's just, do you want to play risky or do you want to play consistent?
Yeah. Do you want to risk only doing 2 damage? However your luck with dice is.
And there are no range 2 slugs in the game.
Yeah, no, all the slugs are long range.
So all the slugs are infinite range weapons. Some of them are front back only because they're above that points threshold.
Yeah.
But we don't have that area like the shreds where you can limit your range and potentially do more damage.
But so yeah, this is where the reliable versus variable shows up the most in the game, in my opinion, is in the slug weapons, because you at almost every point level, you've got at least 2 choices: the reliable one or the variable one with a high spike but lower floor. So like Randy, I know likes to go with the consistent damage because he knows the dice don't like him.
Yeah. Well, and you can pay for Grendel, the gunner, and when that gunner attacks you, add a star. So Grendel is the slug. If a person was a slug weapon, Grendel would be that person. So there's ways to manipulate that with all of your different card combos, so you can lean more in one direction or more in another.
So I don't think we have a slug specific driver like the other ones.
We do, but they're in one of the expansions that's coming out or has already come out. I believe Tex the red, white, and blue driver with
Oh,
the
that's
gunner
right.
with the horns is the slug.
Yes,
Yeah,
he might be
in the
here.
initial
Tex is
waves,
out.
only pyro and machete cared about what weapon types you were firing. But when we were expanding it, we wanted to add so that you could have a little bit more flexibility in your builds of if you
Right.
wanted to lean into a particular weapon type or not.
There he is.
There you go. There's Tex.
Um,
So Tex is in Sonic Strike.
Texas in Sonic Strike.
Yep. Gonzo Gear has a few more weapon specific gunner types in it.
Which the second wave of single player expansions is available for pre-order now. It's not shipping yet, but it is available for pre-order. So that is pull up that list real quick here. So we already have Sonic Strike, Aggressive Arsenal, and Tailgate Trouble out. Gonzo
Yep.
Gear, Albert's Advances, and Offensive Ordnance are in pre-order right now. And those are Albert's Advances was in Uncle Al's upgrade pack as far as cards go, and Offensive Ordnance is the cards from Miniature Set 2 and the hazard cards from Road Tiles. And then Gonzo Gear is 40 new cards.
Yeah.
And we'll break into that
Gonzo
on
is
another
where
stream. Go ahead.
Gonzo's where some of the stranger stuff appears, and yeah, we'll break that one down with an unboxing in the near future.
Yeah, we'll go over that sometime before the end of the year here, breaking open Gonzo Gear. We'll probably go over the other ones. It'll be a fun stream because it's paired with Albert's Advances, which is Uncle Al's pack from the Kickstarter, which was where all the weird stuff in the first round of stuff came from. So that'll be a lot of really fun out there wacky weapons to look at. But yeah, slug weapons I like because they really lean into that dichotomy of do you want consistent or high spike on your rolls for your weapons, and that's really, and slug generally has a slightly higher average because it doesn't have those special effects, right? Or they have the consistent damage, the stars, right?
It just depends.
Yeah.
Because like the flame on a fire weapon is a delayed damage that interferes with control,
Mhm.
and that's costed almost the same as just straight damage right now because it has such a big impact. So like just because something does something special like damages tires instead of whatever, it doesn't mean it necessarily costs different or has a higher damage potential or whatever. But in general, slug weapons are hitting a little higher if you're gambling with them than you would at a normal.
Yeah, and they also have these these higher floors because they have these consistent built-in damage to all of them. Even the one pointers have built-in 1 point of damage to them. So if you are someone who absolutely hates like making your roll and coming up with nothing, slugs may be good for your play style, so you're not get frustrated with things like, because the dice average out eventually, but sometimes it doesn't feel that way. So these let you at least you will at least do this. You will at least do this with every shot. You will at least if you throw on Grendel and some slug weapons, you're going to be doing 2 to 4 or 5 plus a die roll every shot.
Yeah, we build everything on averages, but if you only roll the dice twice during a game, right? If that Devastator is on the front of your car and you only line up that shot twice, then the averages are not going to play out perfectly.
Right. They'll play out over like 4, 5, 6 games, but not in a single game.
It's an expectation, not a promise.
Exactly. So if you value that consistency, then doing a build with heavy slug weapons, Grendel, a few other things to just, hey, look, regardless of what I roll, there's 3 damage coming in here or 4 damage coming in here every time I fire this thing.
My philosophy personally is more dice is more fun. So I usually lean towards rolling dice like putting the targeting computer on, maybe the gunner that adds a blue die. So like a big pile of dice and just see what happens.
I do like big piles of dice, but if the dice have bitten me a lot then in recent times, then I'll
Yeah.
do like I do like to use the jackhammer a lot. Like, hey, look, it's just three, or three, and
Yep.
I'll add a targeting interface, not targeting interface,
The computer.
the computer. Just
Yeah.
add a couple extra dice to things, but but I'm generally like, hey, look, I shoot, it does this. I don't have to worry about it. Let's see. Next up, you have anything else to say on slugs?
Nope. I think we covered everything we need to cover on slugs.
All right. Next up is fire. I'll try to pull a few more things for fire here.
Okay,
I
fire.
don't have pyro in
Fire
this
is
particular
a
set. Yeah.
fire is a category that's almost entirely restricted to range.
Yes,
But when I say almost entirely, here's the funny thing. There are some machine guns that cause fire.
there
So
are.
they're not fire type weapons. They are still shred weapons, but they have a chance to light a fire.
Right.
Also,
So
lasers, which is a weapon type of its own, which we'll
yeah,
talk about.
we'll talk about.
Lasers can also cause fires, but they're not as reliable at causing fires as flame weapons or fire weapons.
Where's one of our big fire weapons here?
So yeah,
Heat
Jimmie's
saber
got
out.
the light machine gun with incendiary rounds.
Yeah, that's the example of something that will not. It's a shred weapon, but instead of shredding, it actually causes fires.
Yeah,
So
but
it's an outlier.
it's that red die is a 1 in 6 chance of causing a fire.
Yeah, so it's not a great chance for fire.
So you're gonna more often get wrenches off that die than you are gonna get. I mean, sorry.
Hits.
Yeah, you're more often gonna get hits off that die, but you're not going to be doing necessarily shred stuff. But the reason it's a shred weapon is because machete still makes it work.
Right. Right.
So
Other things
here's
that
another
modify the shred
thing.
weapons.
Here's another weird thing. Jimmie's got a sidearm on there.
I do. It's one of my
Sidearm.
favorite. It's one of my favorite sidearms.
Sidearm is not technically a fire weapon
It is not.
because sidearms fit into their own category of sidearms. They're not weapons because weapons get attached to your car. So even though that thermite grenade causes fire, it is not affected by things that affect fire weapons,
Like pyro,
like pyro.
who I don't have in this binder. He's
Sure.
but he is like machete in that he adds an extra die to fire weapons.
He adds a black die just like machete does, and he costs 2 points just like machete. He's literally just the
Machete,
fire
but for
version
fire.
of machete. Yeah.
But I do like the thermite grenades are my favorite alternate sidearm.
I'm
Just
a big
because
fan of grenade sidearms in general, just because I don't always want to put limited range weapons on my car, but having that both side arcs with both crew members attacks, if I can get someone really close, and having that hit harder for its points cost. Now
yeah,
you are paying crew points as opposed to build points, so there's that, but you're getting 2 copies of that weapon effectively for 1 crew point. And since it's range limited, it does hit harder.
but let's talk about for anyone who doesn't know what fire does in sixth edition. Fire is kind of
Jimmie.
our it does kill Jimmie. Thank you for reminding chat. I'm surprised no one mentioned it so far.
Yeah.
You guys are slacking. But yeah, fire is a status that gets applied to a particular side of your car. One of your defense arcs gets set on fire. It does not do any damage itself when it happens. During the check for fire stage, after you take control on your next turn, there's a managed fire stage. At that point, for each side of your card that is on fire, because each side is either on fire or it's not. There's not 2, 3, 4 fires on a side.
Yeah.
You have to spend 2 control to remove that token and put it out, or you take 1 point of damage on that side of your car, as per normal damage rules. and you can't avoid it. There's no way to roll to not take it. You just either have to spend 2 control or take a point of damage, and then face that choice again every turn until that fire is put out. Um, which on one side in early game was not a big deal, but when you start getting later in the game and you have less control to start with, or when multiple sides of your vehicle are on fire, if your opponents have managed to light 3 or 4 sides of your vehicle on fire, you are looking at the prospect of spending 6 control or taking a damage on each side of your car. That are three of your sides of your car that turn. That stacks up really quickly, and especially end game when you may only be getting 3 or 4 control a turn. 2 is a
Yeah.
lot. Um,
Also, when you have armor and structure on the side of your car that's on fire, it's a lot less dangerous. Right? If I have 6 armor on my right side and my right side's on fire, it's going to eat 1 point of armor,
yeah,
which
you can
might not
ignore it
be
for a
worth the
while.
control. But if I have 0 armor and 0 structure, it's going to draw a damage card, which,
Yeah,
as we've seen in live streams, might say driver on it and might kill your driver
it might.
if they have only 1 hit point left, right? You're taking that risk of which card of the 6 you pull and if you can take it or not. So if you
Yeah,
have structures and armor, it's a known quantity of, oh, I'm going to lose a damage point on this thing I know about.
I can
If
let it ride
not,
for a turn. But the
if not, it's
danger,
it's random.
yeah, the danger in that though is you are saying, okay, I still have 6 armor. I can wait. I can put that off and deal
Hmm.
with it next turn or a couple turns from now because no one's on that side of me. I'm keeping it protected. I can just let it burn for a bit. The problem
Yep.
comes if they hit you again with another fire weapon on another arc. And then you're like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I can do it. But now I'm looking at, I've got 4 control. I got to get rid of at some point to clear this up. And if they do it again while you're still waiting, then you've got 6 control. Like, if you don't occasionally take time to clear it, it becomes a bigger and bigger problem.
Yep.
Or there are of course fire mitigation systems built in that will either put it out for you or soak the damage for you, things like that. There are
Yeah,
some things you can do.
there are 3 or 4 ways to deal with fire damage, but those are also trying to predict what your opponents are going to do, right? If you have a friend who always brings fire weapons, then bringing anti-fire things,
It's a good call.
regardless, there's different options, is a great option. But if you're like, well, 2 games ago, Brad brought fire, but if he thinks that I'm preparing for fire this time, maybe he doesn't bring fire this time. So it's one of those, like, playing chicken with your opponents to a certain extent.
Right?
And if
You rock
you
paper
guess
scissoring it.
wrong, and they bring fire and you have no way to deal with it besides the standard way of paying control or taking damage, then you know that's what you did. But if you bring 3 ways to mitigate fire and nobody has any fire weapons, there is still a way you can get lit on fire with a damage card,
Yeah, the
but it's very
damage card
rare in
still
the
has
damage
effect.
deck.
So it's never completely off the table.
Yeah.
But yeah, how heavy you lean into the protection probably depends on the tables you play with.
The other important thing about fire is
Mhm.
that wrench where it says wrench equals fire. The very first wrench lights a fire, and then all the other wrenches after it do damage.
Right, yeah, because
So
fire
if
is a status, right? That side is on fire or it's
yeah,
not. Once it's on fire, any further fire results just become normal damage.
yeah. So if you look at that heat saber, it has wrenches on the red and wrenches on the white.
Yep.
So that means if you roll max wrenches, which would be 3, you'd be lighting a fire and then adding 2 normal damage to your roll.
Right. Yeah.
And unless the person's already on fire on that side, and then it all turns into damage.
Yeah. So it's never fire is most of the status effects have this rule. Most of the wrench effects have this rule rather. Is that if you uh, come up with more results than your target can handle, it usually just converts to normal damage.
Yeah.
Like if you do more tire damage than they have, the extra converts to normal. If you do fire damage, they're already on fire, it just converts to normal damage. So you're not going to miss out on damage by going to some of these different weapon types. Now some of your one of your basic this is just your basic flamethrower here. 2-pointer, um, one yellow which has no wrenches, two greens which both have I think a wrench and a double wrench on them.
They
No,
have no, they
wrench
have
and
2 wrenches and then 2 double stars.
2 wrenches, two double stars. There you go. So that one fairly high spike, but like most flame weapons, most fire weapons, they do have a range of 2. So you are in
Yeah.
that 2 car length range. So it's a close in weapon. You've got to get up on them to use it. And then you go up near the top end there. Heat Saber is not the biggest one. Is it?
No, it's not the biggest one.
Still pretty
There's the
hefty.
plasma cannon at 8. Plasma
Yeah.
cannon is in mini set 2 originally, and
there
it's
we
going
go.
to be in one of the reprint sets.
I think the one we just talked about, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure which reprint set it's in.
So Heat Saber is the highest one in the double ace that I've got here.
Yeah.
But still, it's no slouch. You're 2 automatic damage, and then your red and your white both give chances for wrenches. White has a chance for double wrenches and double damage. So that's a beefy, just slicing through them weapon there.
Yeah, it's a potential 8 damage.
Yeah.
And always 2. If you're
Always
within
2.
range 2 of somebody, no matter how bad you roll, you're going to be forcing them to deal with 2 damage, whether that's in their defense roll or putting damage points into their vehicle.
I gotta imagine that one averages 4 or 5.
That one averages slightly below 5 because there are decimal points in our average system because the way the dice work.
Yeah. So yeah, fire, fun thing, but you do have to get up on people to use it reliably. We'll talk about lasers in a minute, which are the sort of the counterpoint to it. There's not really a inside the fire weapon category. There's not really that 2 variant thing that we were talking about.
Yeah.
But that's because there is a second weapon type that kind of plays as that for fire. And let's go ahead and go to that next.
Yeah. So when you're looking at weapon types, weapon subtypes, they're named the way they are so that it's easy to remember their rule. So fire weapons generally light fires. Slug weapons generally have no special rules. Shred weapons generally hurt tires. Now there are, like we said, the exceptions, like the incendiary bullets and those kind of things. But just as a shorthand, a fire weapon has a chance to light fires. Lasers are named lasers because they have 2 standard abilities, and the fire is the less likely one.
Right.
So it's easier to say, I have lasers, and you know what lasers means. It means the range rule on lasers, and maybe sometimes fire.
A couple examples.
Also, in the new expansion pack, Sonic Strike and Godzo Gear, one of those 2, there is a laser gunner. So for the first time, Pyro and Machete are getting some friends to focus on other weapon types.
Welcome on in to Completed Uranium Cowboy. Hi, Tijuana.
Lasers are also generally consistent.
Yeah.
Almost every laser in the game has some stars on it in addition to its dice rolls.
Yeah. They're consistent. And their main rule is that they reduce the range by 2 increments. So they are designed as your I want to stay away and snipe at a distance weapons.
Mm-hmm. Now, those range rerolls are rerolling dice that the target has. So if they're out of control, the laser's rule doesn't really do anything.
Right.
But if someone's really far away from you and going really fast, they're going to get a couple rerolls from that distance, and the lasers are going to cut that number of rerolls down. So it's upping your chances of success.
Yeah. And in my experience playing, most shots beyond 2 range increments are just, Hail Mary long shots.
Yeah, it depends on the size of the weapon and the speed of the target and all that stuff. But on average, the farther away you are from someone, the harder it is to get through their defenses.
Yeah, and that's also partially because because most of my games we play are on stream here, we generally play mid to low point games. So I don't usually
Yeah.
have anything above a 5 to work with as far as weapons go. So we're not using the big heavy hitters on people. So because you roll your hits, but any shield they roll takes away some of your hits. The further away you are, the more rerolls they get on that, and the more reliable they can reduce the number of hits you do. So it becomes I'm rolling 5 dice, but um, rolling it from across the board at 4 range increments away, they are probably going to maybe take 1 hit or no hits out of it.
Yeah.
So lasers brings that. So most of the time, if it's beyond 3 range increments, I'd take a shot because I can, but I don't really have any hope for that to do anything. This shrinks the size of the arena quite a bit for that, because on a 3x3 arena, you're not going to get like if normally I would only take a shot at 3 or less. This moves that to like a 5 or less, and I think you can maybe get 6 away if you're really good, really far across the arena from each other. But
It's
it-
difficult, but if you're pushing the corners, you and your opponent are both pushing the corners, then you're getting a lot of rerolls for range.
yeah. So this really does, especially in wide open arenas, shrink that arena size quite a bit for you as the attacker.
So
Uh,
the other thing that we talked about is that the points you're spending on stuff is getting you damage.
Mhm.
It's also getting you durability. So lasers, as a rule, only have 1 durability,
Right, they are fragile.
as opposed to machine guns and slug weapons and other things like that usually have 2.
Yeah, most weapons will have 2,
Yeah.
and then
An
some
armored version
big
of a
ones.
weapon will have more, and some other weapons will have more.
Yeah.
But when a laser takes damage, it's broken. It's very fragile because you're getting those extra rules, and you're not paying a damage reduction for those extra rules. You're paying the laser doesn't last as long in a fight. So if you are focusing heavily on lasers, you want to also try to do extra damage mitigation steps, whether that's structure or other things to protect your weapons.
Yeah, either
That's
don't take
something
the
you should
hits
think about.
or throw on a cheap machine gun to soak the weapon damage, or
Yeah.
anything to throw on more structure to soak more damage, so the lasers stay there longer. Yeah, you do have to protect them. They are fragile, and that is their main drawback. But they have that consistent damage, and like I said, most of these, both of these lasers, for example, only have a single red die, which has what, 2 wrenches on it. So it's a
No,
1/3
that's the single wrench. The
single wrench.
red die is generally where lasers get their fire.
Yeah.
So
So you've got a 1 in 6.
almost every one of the laser weapons only has a red die. So it has a very rare chance of lighting a fire, which is
Yeah.
what I was talking about earlier, where fire weapons tend to roll whites and reds and sometimes greens.
Greens, yeah.
No laser except one, which we'll talk about in a second, is rolling anything except a red. So you have a 1 in 6 chance, just flat out, when you fire that weapon, of adding a fire. And Jimmie's sneaking that other one in there. So this is a chance to talk about linked weapons too. But you'll notice that thematically, since this is 2 weapons firing, it has a slightly higher chance of causing a fire, but it's only that 1 green die, and that's only adding 2 wrench chances as opposed to 1 wrench chance.
Yeah. So it is still fragile. It's still a laser, but the linked is we can take a slight diversion of linked. It is not a weapon type per se, because it's not a subtype of weapon, but
Yeah.
it is a feature that gets added to some other types of weapons. There are linked machine guns. There's the linked pulse laser.
There's linked jackhammers.
There's linked hammerheads. There's linked jackhammers.
There's
Linked
flamethrowers.
disruptors.
There's
Yeah.
linked brush cutters. So there's
basically it is
generally one linked weapon per type.
Yeah, and it's something that like the old system had. It was like you could put links between weapons that you already had on the thing, but the way we built the purchasing and building system in 6th edition, we just decided it would be better to make it as a single card, so you weren't having to track okay, well, which two things are they on the right side to be linked? Do you have which ones is that link card touching? And we just
Yeah.
made it a single thing. But link weapons, their main feature is that you can re-roll dice.
Yeah, so you're paying a little bit of a damage penalty when you link a weapon, but you're getting more reliability out of it.
Yeah. So it is a way to go into each category of weapon and say, okay, well, here's this. Again, if you want reliable on the specific one, you can just here reroll to your dice that you were already rolling. And so if you are someone who likes big honking handfuls of dice on your things, getting the linked version of a weapon may be a good upgrade for you on that. Just because those
Yeah.
rerolls, that combined with the targeting system, which is another reroll, and combined sometimes with some other accessories or crew, like yes, I'm rolling dice, but I get to reroll a lot of them. So
Yeah,
I'm
also
making it reliable
any
that way.
rule that adds a die to that die roll is part of that reroll, right? It doesn't say that you're limited to dice rolled by this weapon, right? So any dice in your attack pool, if you add
Yeah.
3 dice to this attack by combining gunners and equipment and that kind of stuff, then any of those is gonna up your average because you're gonna get to reroll any of them.
Yep. A couple things in chat real quick. Is there a list of cards and breakdown on their probabilities, costs, special effects, and rules? No. No. Well, not for public. No. There are, yes, the
No,
designers have spreadsheets that they reference against and
Yeah.
balance things against. But no, we haven't published that.
There are some fan created resources floating around on the internet, Facebook groups and whatnot.
Sure.
I believe somebody has built their own math spreadsheet and that kind of stuff.
There's someone's done a lot of work on the threads on Board Game Geek on breaking
Yeah.
down all the weapons and everything. So actually, if that's the sort of thing you want, I would start there because they've done some forum threads at each point cost tier of weapon, some pretty heavy analysis breakdown. It's a lot of math, so I can't comment
Yeah,
on the quality of the math. I have not tried to break it
Randy
down.
made the math. I didn't do the math for this
But
game because I'm not that person.
so I can't comment on the quality of the math for the fan made resource because I have not broken it down or put it in front of Randy. But someone has done a lot of work in a lot of spreadsheets, so you can go look up there and
Yeah.
double check it yourself. And a good point about lasers being fragile. Yeah, they are your long range variant, and they are less likely. They're less likely to cause a fire, but they will occasionally do it. But they're fragile and long range, as opposed to the normal flame weapons, which have much higher chances to cause fires, but are almost exclusively range 2.
Yeah.
So those are kind of the two. They're not in the same category, but those are kind of the two variants of weapons that can cause fire versions, the reliable and
Yeah.
less reliable versions of that. Let's see then. Big pile of cards. Blast weapons.
Yeah,
are
blast
next
is the
one.
last of the 4 primary categories.
Yep.
And we did do lasers before that, but
Yeah, well, it was a kind of natural follow on. So it's a few blasts out here.
blasts also have a subtype split, but they're completely different than the reliable or not reliable, but with a higher spike chance. And most blast weapons fit into the first category, which is the buy one get one, because
Right.
they're many blast weapons are rockets. There
Yeah.
is a blast gun, the hammerhead and the linked hammerheads.
Yep. Pulling the hammerhead now.
But rockets, in addition to being blast weapons, you get one shot with them. Now the asterisks in the costs on the standard rocket means you pay 3 and you get 2 copies of it. So you're effectively getting 2 shots, which you can apply to different sides of your vehicle, or you can put them both on the same side. It's up to you. And because you're paying effectively to only shoot it once, its damage is much higher than its cost. The rocket that costs 8 is 11, which is one of the highest max damages in the entire game.
Did I not put? Yeah, there it is. Heavy rocket. Yeah.
Yeah, the heavy rocket's on there.
Yeah. So the thing is, and the thing about rockets is they're also fragile, right?
Yes.
They are 1 point. They are also one shot. So you spend these points and you get in many cases 2 of them. But if someone can hit a weapon result on that, it can go away before you get a chance to shoot it.
Yeah, don't be precious with your rockets. Don't just fire them off first chance you get, but don't sit on them hoping for a perfect situation late game, because they're probably not going to be alive by then.
So let's talk about the status feature on the rockets. The special
Mhm.
type on the rockets is they do blast attacks, and in the base game, the blast attack means if you roll that result, the target loses 1 control. Prior to anything else, they just lose a control, no defense against that. If you roll a blast result, they're going to lose a control. So rockets are real good as your first shot in a round against someone that maybe has run themselves down to their last control point, because
Yeah.
you can maybe knock them out of control and then follow up with a second attack that they don't get to roll a defense against. But
They
also,
are
they're
a
generally a
pretty
high damage spike.
they're a pretty good way of painting a target.
Yeah.
If you're a little bit closer to an opponent, but there's another player that only has 1 control left, if you can knock that control off of them, then your opponent might choose to shoot them because they won't get any dice on their defense roll, as opposed to maybe you getting 3 or 4 or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's a way to kind of encourage other players to do things they might not want to do, because it's too good of a chance to avoid usually of firing at someone who's out of control.
Now, did we in the companion book? Did we put the alternate rules in there?
There's an alternate blast rule to have blasts last a little bit longer, to kind of act a little bit like fire, where they do control loss at the beginning of the round if you took blasts. But that's not a standard rule,
Yeah, it's a variant.
because most of the blast weapons hit really hard, so we did not adjust that rule the way that we adjusted the dropped weapon rule in Tailgate Trouble.
But yeah, so
But if
these
you
are generally
do,
higher spiking damage. Did I put 2 of the same rocket
yeah,
up there? I did.
but if you do want to experiment with making blast weapons more powerful in your group, if you really like them, but you think they should do a little bit more, then the Shaken card that is being put out with those new expansions also has a little bit of that theme of, if you get shaken, then you lose control at the beginning of the next round, and the Shaken card goes away. And that totally does fit into the theme of that alternate rule, with the blast kind of making you lose a little bit more control than that 1 instant control.
Right. It's got a little bit of lasting effect.
Yeah.
Because so I know some people felt like, okay, but if they're not on their last control point, then it doesn't really matter if they lose 1 or not.
Yeah.
Because they've already driven by the time we were firing weapons. So it's just if they were not running it on the red line, then a lot of people felt that there wasn't enough going on, even though these are higher spiking damage weapons. So that's a way to, if that's how your group feels, you go ahead and use those alternate rules with the shaken cards and kind of move some of that extra oomph to them.
One of the other little strategy things I want to bring up, because it's one of my favorite things conceptually to do with rockets, is there are 2 upgrade cards for concealment systems, simple and complex.
Mm-hmm.
And those cards, you put them on your card, right? They're an upgrade, so they can't be shut off. And when you decide to trigger them, you get to equip weapons to your car as if they'd been there the whole time, but they hadn't. So that's a way to have rockets late game that cannot be shut off of your car early game, because they're not technically there.
Right. Those are a hidden weapon system.
Yeah, so all of a sudden you
used
push a
rockets.
button and a rocket launcher door opens on the side of your car that no one knew was there. And the simple one lets you equip 3 points. So that is a couple of standard rockets.
Yep.
So like late game, if you've been sitting on that, now it costs you 4 points to put it on. So it costs 1 extra point basically for that infinite shield on that thing. But if suddenly late game you've got a couple of rocket shots, rockets are much more impactful.
When people are
because
already running on low control
if
anyway.
if players' tires are almost all gone and there's been some fire thrown around in the round before, someone's going to be sitting maybe on 1 or 2 control at the start of the round. And if they manage to maintain that control throughout the driving phase, then that rocket's going to potentially knock them out of control and make them a target for everybody else, or set up your second shot to be against them when they're out of control.
Or even
Because the
just
other
a good
important thing
Yeah.
that you said earlier is nothing can block that wrench result.
Right, yeah. If you roll it,
If-
it happens, just like the fire. If
If
you
the
roll it, it happens.
if the wrench happens, yeah. Now on the shred, those tire damage shields block them first, so you
Yeah.
can't choose what you're going to block when a shred weapon's hitting you. You have to block the wrenches first. But for fire and blast, the wrench triggers and then goes away, and then the damage is compared
damage
to
resolution
the
happens, yeah.
shields.
Yeah.
So there's absolutely nothing your opponent can do to stop that blast from happening if you roll that wrench. And like for that heavy rocket, the black die has those 4 wrench results, right? And the
Right.
red die has 1. So you've got a really good chance on that rocket of causing that blast.
Yep. And a lot of damage.
Yeah. And like I
And,
said, there's a linked hammerhead too. So if you want that rerollability to dig for that blast, then the linked hammerhead is your chance to do that just on the card itself.
Yep. And the hammerhead is the example of it's the non one use blast weapon.
Yeah, it's a grenade launcher or something. It's firing little tiny explosions that do the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's got a little bit more consistency than a rocket. It's going to last the whole game potentially because you don't shoot it and lose it, and it also has 2 hit points instead of 1. But you're paying 6 points for 1 weapon system instead of potentially those 6 points for, a split. If there's only 3 rockets that are the buy one get one, that's one mistake that some new players make, is that they think that a rocket is always buy one get one, but it's only buy one get one when it has that text on the card.
Yeah.
So the standard,
I think all 3 in the base set have that.
yeah. So there's a light rocket, a standard rocket, and a heavy rocket.
Yeah.
And those are all buy one get one. The other rockets, the laser guided, the armor piercing, those have their own special effects, which Randy and Sam decided in the designing process were cost effective enough to not give you a buy one get one on those rockets.
Right.
So
They're
don't
more
make that mistake
specialized.
accidentally of grabbing 2 copies of every rocket that you put on your vehicle.
All right. Anything else to say about the slugs? Or the rockets? Blast weapons that we're talking about.
The blast weapons, no, nothing in particular.
Okay.
I thought you might sneak a turret into that conversation.
Not
like
yet,
you
not yet.
Sneak the linked weapons in the last one.
I was looking at those, so we can do those next because those are the last core set thing we're looking at.
Those are the last
well, that's not
existing
quite.
thing
Not quite.
before the expansions.
There's one other thing, and we'll bring that one out.
Oh,
we'll bring that
yeah,
out first,
I
then we'll
forgot.
do turrets.
Yeah,
that
we'll
is
talk about those
the shock weapons. Let's see. There's some link disruptors, and
shock weapons are weird.
It's a small category. There's not a lot of them. Is it just the link disruptors in the core set?
You mean in the double ace?
Yeah, the double ace, yeah. Oh, here's the shockwave cannon. And then we'll cover the last one when we do the other one. So there are we'll delve into a couple others because there were some in this expansion in Sonic Strike. There were more shock weapons in there, so I'll put a couple of those up here too.
Yeah.
Chat wants to know: are there range limited blast weapons?
Range limited blast weapons. Actually,
there are not technically, because the grenade is not a blast weapon. It does have the blast effect on it, just like we were talking about with that incendiary grenade. It doesn't fit into that category rules-wise.
Yeah, there's
So
a
if you have a
concussion
thing that
grenade.
affects blast weapons, it doesn't. But there is a concussion grenade that does the wrench equals blast.
Yeah. So that's also another one. Like if you like the blast effect or if you want that ability, it's a sidearm because it's a grenade, right?
Yep.
One feature sidearms is nothing destroys them.
Yeah.
So you can always have, if you want to spend that one crew point, you can always have, just like you could always have the flame option in your pocket with the thermite grenade. You can always have that concussion grenade in your pocket if you want to spend that 1 point. And if anyone gets close to you and only has 1 point left, let's pop that grenade out. And it's got a green and a white die on it. Red, green, and white. So all three of those dice have wrenches on them.
That's a super reliable blast weapon.
Yeah.
But you're paying that range difference, and you have less crew points than build points in general in a game.
So it's one of those ones that the thing I often find about grenades is that because you don't always use them because they are range limited, people forget you have them.
Yeah.
And so they'll pull up and forget that you've got that high damage or high fire chance or high concussion chance thing just in your pocket, and they'll pull up next to you. And if they do it at the wrong time, you can remind them real well.
And that's an important thing.
Yeah, and they're unlimited. Yeah.
It's an important thing about strategy in this game. Players' builds, unless they're using that concealment card, are public knowledge.
Yep.
So always look at what your opponent is packing, because it's the same thing for flame weapons and the shreds that are limited range, right? If you forget or never checked and drive into the range of a limited range weapon, you're going to take more damage than you would if you were at the same cost at a distance. So keep in mind what your opponents have equipped to their entire setup, not just the machine guns on the side of their car. Look at their crew area, because there's upgrades and other stuff that can affect all that damage output too.
Yeah, like if you roll up to somebody and they say, "Oh, cool," and they bring out that turning key, kind of hovering it over to see, you're like, "Uh-oh, what do you mean you've got a thermite grenade and what is it, the
holographic sight
holographic sight
and
is the gear that adds a blue die to range 2.
Yep.
To anything within range 2 on a sidearm, so it affects the hand cannon and everything else too. But when you're already hitting as hard as those grenades hit, then that extra die will push you.
It pushes it up even further. Yep. All right, so shock weapons. Shock weapons are weird. So they turn wrenches into just more damage, right?
Yep.
So they take that spot where they don't have the extra built-in damage like a slug weapon does, but those wrench results are useful on a shock weapon as opposed to slug weapons were not. So they are variable, but they can, with wrenches, lets them spike higher. So when you see that black die or the green die, which these almost all have, one or the other one of those are just going to convert to damage, except for the one on the end there.
Well, so this is the feature.
Right.
This is the feature of these. Their special rule is the more important part of their text.
It's true. Because if you roll double wrenches on any of these weapons, they take a damage.
Yeah. So they have more hit points than a standard weapon. They have 3 hit points, which is some of the most, healthy weapons in the entire game. But they're doing that because they're paying for those higher average rolls to a certain extent.
Yep.
By maybe burning themselves out. Now this weapon pairs really good with the gunner that can let you reroll and the accessory that targeting interface that can let you reroll.
Because you can make sure, like, oh, I rolled one. I don't want to roll that other one. I'm going to reroll that die.
Because you'll also notice every single one of these has 2 dice in it that can roll wrenches.
Yep.
Whether that's a black or a green, and that electrostatic beam on the end, it can roll wrenches pretty often, which means it's really reliable for the status effect, the overload status effect that it can put on things.
Right.
But it's also really possible to burn itself out. So it's a special shock weapon that doesn't fit exactly in the same category because it's also got that status effect on top of it.
Right. That was something that got added to a couple of them in Sonic Strike,
Yeah.
which is this overload effect here. We'll put it over this one right here. Which is a crew status you put, like if you roll a wrench, then they get the overload card. And they can only have one of them, so it is a status. And then the next time you make a maneuver, you add one white die to your driving roll, and then return this to the supply. So it can be significant because there's 2 skids on that. There's a double skid face on that. Yeah.
And there's a single skid, and there's a single wrench, and there's a double wrench.
Yep.
So there's only 2 safe faces on that die, and you have a pretty good chance of having a double. And if that double is your tires, then that can knock you down control-wise and maximum speed-wise significantly, especially mid-game.
Yeah, that white die is generally why people don't go for the full 90-degree turns most of the time.
Yep.
Because they don't want to roll that white die. And this just lets you just, hey, if I hit you with this thing and roll a wrench, and, on 2 black dice, I'm probably going to roll a wrench. I can just make you roll that the next time you do a maneuver.
Yep. And if someone is close to a wall, whether that's the outer arena wall or a wall obstacle in the middle of the arena, and they're going to need to make a 90-degree turn, you can make it even worse by overloading them.
Or having them 2 white dice in the roll. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's terrifying.
And,
right?
and I will note that electrostatic
so much
beam
tire damage
does not have the normal shock penalty on it.
Yeah, it doesn't. But
If
that's
you
why
roll
it
double
also
wrenches, you don't get it.
That's why it also has 1 less hit point.
Right, it's got the normal amount of hit points for a weapon of its cost. And and like most things, if they already have that status effect on them, then it just becomes damage. So it is kind of the equivalent to the light machine gun, where you're rolling 2 black dice. What you really want out of this weapon is you want to apply the status effect.
Yep.
And your goal is not necessarily anything else other than to get the special effect of the weapon to happen. This is a new one for Sonic Strike. So you won't have to worry about overload if you're only playing with the base set. You'll just be dealing with the normal higher spiking shock weapons that we had originally. And then anything else about the shock weapons?
No, did you find a turreted weapon?
I know where they are. Yeah.
Okay. I just didn't know if you pulled out the shock turret or not.
That's the other shock weapon in the base set is the turret version. Go to our turrets. So that's our next category to jump to. Again, not a weapon type as far as type subtype things go, but there are several. It is like linked weapons. This is a feature that applies across several of the weapon types.
There's generally
there's
a
one
turret.
of each of these.
There's a turreted flamethrower, there's turreted rockets, there's turreted machine guns. There is not a Sonic turret yet. We put a bunch of Sonic weapons into Sonic Strike, but unless my brain has completely left me this morning, there's not a Sonic turret yet.
I did not see one now. So the turrets are interesting. So that the special thing about turrets is, again, they're not a weapon type. They're a classification. They have some special rules, like
there's a special rule added to a weapon type.
Right, to make it a turreted weapon. So a turreted weapon, when you purchase it, you can see the text only says, place in your crew area. This is considered equipped to all firing arcs. So you can have, and they are exclusive, which means you can only have one turreted weapon.
You can only have one exclusive card in general.
One exclusive card, yeah.
Yeah.
So the presence of one excludes the other ones, basically. So you can have one turret. And all the turrets that are in the base set are 3-point cost. Like what aren't up here is there's also a shotgun, which is a shred, a recoilless rifle, which is a slug, and a particle beam, which is a laser. But all of these are 3-pointers.
Yeah, there is one exception, because there's always one exception.
Yeah.
There is a heavy rocket turret. So that was the standard rocket turret. There's also a heavy rocket turret, and the heavy rocket turret does cost 8.
Yeah. But so these are in all firing arcs there, which means the main benefit of the turrets is you can use them no matter, you don't have to worry about lining up the shot. They're always there. They're always in the firing arc for the turret. Now the balancing act for that is these are generally a little less powerful than a normal weapon of that type would be at that cost.
And they're significantly less powerful when you're just comparing flat damage output, because they have that 360 effect and more hit points.
Yeah, because they all have three or more. Most of them have 3 or more hit points. They all have an additional hit point over what your normal would have.
Yeah, you're paying for the flexibility and the hit points, and the fact that, remember, like we said earlier, when you have multiple weapons and you get a weapon result on a damage card, you get to pick the one you want. So if you have a really important gun, like a flamethrower on your right side that you really want to keep, and you have a turreted machine gun, that turreted machine gun is optionally going to keep that flamethrower alive, or vice versa.
Right, because
So,
they are on all sides for attacking and for defending.
Yeah.
So if you've lost all the weapons on your right side and you come up with a weapon damage result again, you're like, aha, I don't have any more. Yes, you do. The turret is still on that side of your car and is a valid target for damage on that side. But also, yeah, if you want to protect something on that side of your car, you can soak some of it on the turret.
And that's also why I suggested earlier that everybody pay attention to what people have equipped on their cars. If you glance across the table really fast and you're like, oh, Jimmie has a flamethrower on the right side of his car, so that means I'm safe on the right side of his car as long as I'm more than 2 car lengths away. But Jimmie put a turreted machine gun also on the car, which is in the crew area, so you might not spot it initially. Then you're forgetting that. Also, Machete loves to have that turreted machine gun, right? Because Machete's adding a black die to it. And it means that you don't have to load up shred weapons on all 4 sides of your car to make sure that Machete can always be applying that black die to attack.
Right.
Because, like we were talking about way earlier today, your tailgate is usually not a place where you get to pick your shots, right? It's very difficult to line up the back of your car with your perfect target.
Right, and a lot of people,
Now,
myself included, short the back arc of the car a lot of times.
Yeah, but I've also seen a game end with one player reversing at speed 1, chasing someone because their only gun was on the backside of their car.
Right.
But that turret is a way to ensure that even if someone tries to hide in your back arc, you can still fire at them.
You can still fire at them. You can bring it around. You can bring it around to the front. You always have that extra shot available, even if it's not your big bad shot. Like you can still add all your other modifiers. You can still add onto it instead. So if someone suddenly thinks they're in a safe arc, or you just like, well, I used to have 2 guns. The other thing that it is, I find it good for myself is if you can save 3 points for a turret, then you always have a second shot in any arc.
Yeah, that's the other important element of it.
So especially if you're going for budget builds, it really helps round out those lower point builds. Or if you're going, big high weapons on things, if you can just save 3 points, then your driver can still fire the turret at somebody, right? They don't have to rely on a sidearm or nothing if it's the front or rear.
Because the other thing you have to think about, right? The cheapest weapon you can equip to a side is 1 point.
Yep.
So if you want to put a light machine gun on every side of your car, it costs 4 points. Now, the light machine gun and the turret machine gun are fairly similar when it comes to damage output, but it is cheaper, effectively, to put a turret on your car than to equip a 1 point light machine gun to all 4 sides.
Yep. And it's got, it's got a little less armor than 4 light machine guns would have, but it's still a better use of points, and all around, I think it works out a lot better in many cases.
Yeah, it's that flexibility that you're really paying for.
Exactly. they're like none of them are stellar damage weapons, right? They're
No,
all
they're not.
they're all right. Uh,
They're not amazing, but
but
they
as your
they're gonna
backup
do
weapon
something.
or an option or a stopgap or a last resort, it's there. It can give you that second shot where you wouldn't normally have it. It can cover an arc you might have lost something on already. It can soak damage for the big weapon on a side, um, all for those 3 points. So the turrets are really good, which is why you can only have one of them.
Yeah,
People are like, yeah, well, I just want to spend like 15 points on turrets and always have the like one of the things we got rid of from older editions because turrets were very strong, and if they were always so good, they would become the way to play. So we had to give them significant enough drawbacks to still be really good for 3 points, but not be like, well, why would you put anything other than turrets on your car?
well, and that's also an important element of the philosophy of 6th edition in general. In older editions, you had accessories and stuff like you were talking about earlier with linked weapons, and then you had weapons. So you had all kinds of different machine guns, and you could mount any of those machine guns in a turret.
Yeah.
Well, the damage output and efficiency of sticking anything into the turret makes the turret effectively cost a different amount depending on what you put in it. And that's very difficult to balance.
Yeah.
So the reason you see things like the laser guided machine gun and the incendiary bullet machine gun and the linked weapons and the turret weapons is so that we can control the output of that cool option without having to worry about all the possible combinations of, if we just gave you incendiary bullets and you could attach those to any card, then we'd have to worry about every single permutation of what does those incendiary bullets do to that card.
Right. Like if we made a turret upgrade for anything, they're like, well, when
Yeah.
we made turrets, we didn't think about the Banshee, and wow, everyone's gonna
Yeah.
run that.
It lets us, because I get this question at a lot of at cons and anytime I'm around Card Wars players of, hey, why isn't it like attachment cards that change how a weapon works, and that balance conversation, and no game can be perfectly balanced, right? Like humans are humans. Math can only take us so far, so we're never going to make a perfect game, but we can get closer to fair and balanced by limiting those things, but still letting you have those cool optional rules where you're effectively firing more bullets with your linked weapons so you have more chances to hit, which we incorporate into dice rerolls, as opposed to just saying, okay, take 2 weapons and link them with this other card that says roll all their dice at the same time, potentially opening up problems in the long term as we add more and more things to the game.
Right. It limits the potential future combinations. It lets us go, okay, if we want to go ahead and throw in a sonic turret or a new style shock turret, we can do it in a way that is balanced for that type of card, as opposed to going, well, now no, everyone's driving nothing but sonic turret cars out there.
Yeah.
Because it's just the way to go. We were very aware of the propensity for in not just this game, in a lot of games, people will find, oh, that combination works the best, and suddenly that's like 90% of people, that's what they're playing when they go play the game. And
yes,
then there
is a certain psychographic profile that likes optimization.
Yeah. And also the group thing, like, oh well, I played against this build, it was real strong, I'm going to build that, and then suddenly, everybody in the group, except for somebody who didn't get to play last month when people started doing this, and they show up to the table and everybody's running nothing but sonic turret builds with a particular driver, and the guy is sitting here with his flamethrower guy going, what's going on? Why am I just getting deleted? So we wanted to try to build in a lot of protections against that sort of thing. All right, we are down to the last weapon type, and we're not.
Well,
there's another classic weapon type we forgot. Nope.
Technically, there's a super uncommon weapon type.
Yep, I got it right here for me.
The entire number of cards. Now we are adding more things into this category with the new expansions.
Is this the only one in the base set? Nope, there's another one. There's a one pointer. The melee cards.
Yeah, anytime you hear Jimmie say base set, he means Kickstarter releases.
Yeah, sorry, the Kickstarter releases.
Yeah.
The set we've got here in the
original wave-
studio is the double A set. So it's the core set plus miniature set 1, 3, and
Linked and dropped.
linked
I
and
believe.
dropped and crew. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so this
Sorry.
this is the in the original wave, there's only 3 cards that are melee cards. And
This one?
they are the most limited in range. They are range 1 cards. So 1 card length, not 1 turning key. Always
Yep.
remember that.
Yeah, one
Range
car
in this
length.
game is in card lengths, not in turning keys.
So you got to be right up on somebody to use these.
Yes.
But
But they hit significantly harder than their equivalent.
and they're
the-
reliable.
The slug weapon that costs 1 point, that's not the 1 point slug weapons, they hit just barely harder than a hand cannon. And the hand cannon is, since it's free and you effectively get 2 of them, it's kind of the baseline. Its average is 1.5 because it rolls 3 blue dice.
Yeah.
So 1.5 is kind of the floor of damage because that's the free hand cannon.
Right. And so your recoilless rifle is there's
That-
3 damage results on there
Um,
on the red.
there, yes, with the 2 reds and the star,
reds, yeah.
your max damage is 3.
Yeah.
And your average is going to be on those 2 reds is slightly more than half.
Yeah. So you're slightly more than 1.5.
Yeah.
for that.
Now you'll notice if 1.5 is the floor, the brush cutter is already at 2, just
Right.
flat out at 2, and it has the potential of going to 4
Because there is a
because
double
of the
wrench
doubles.
and a double star on that green die. Yeah.
Well, there's 2 double stars, but the fact that there's also 2 individual sides that have wrenches
Right.
pushes the average and a single star. There's a lot of successes on that green die,
Yeah.
so that pushes that average real high compared to the hand cannon.
For a
But
single point.
you gotta be real close.
Yeah. You got to be on
And-
someone.
They don't have a lot of damage, durability.
Yeah.
But if you can get right on top of somebody, then this is one of the best cost-effective for points build damage rolls in the game.
And so where I see these used most often is in somebody who likes to do some ramming. Because if you end your turn in contact with somebody, they're at range 1. So as long as that side has a brush cutter or a bone saw on it, then your attack is going to be, and now I turn the bone saw on.
As long you have to be careful, right? Because always keep in mind, colliding with other people damages you and damages you first.
Yeah.
So if you have that brush cutter on the front of your car and no structures and stuff to protect it, and you ram into somebody, the damage card might say your brush cutter gets torn off your car before you get to use it.
Yeah.
But
you could
if
lose it
you've
first.
built your car to survive collisions, then that brush cutter is just a little bit more on top of that. You're already in the person's face, rubbing your car up against those.
Yeah. So those are real good. Like if you plan to be, if you're building to be hitting people a few times, which is about all you get before you run out of anything you built to mitigate it most of the time.
Yeah.
But those can be a real good 1-2 punch if you're planning on ending in contact and being sure that you're within range to use them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they do a lot for their points.
And there are going to be more, and they're going to be weirder.
Those are
my
in
favorite.
Those are in the. Are those Gonzo gear or are those in the next wave?
I believe that. Well, the third wave doesn't have any new cards in it. The third wave is just the catch up. So
it'll be Gonzo
I believe
gear
they're
then.
all Gonzo gear. And the one I keep talking about, which I'm still not telling you what it does, is the flame saw. It's a flaming chainsaw. It's my favorite new melee weapon in the entire game. But we'll get to that in the future. So
Yeah,
now we have covered all of the existing
all of the
before Sonic Strike weapon types.
all of the ones that existed in the Kickstarter release materials. Kickstarter and original release materials. So the last ones we've got here then are these Sonic weapons.
Yeah,
which
so these are
the
brand
whole
new
new type.
in Sonic Strike. Since we were doing a couple of expansions that gave us enough depth to play around, we thought of all the things that weapons were doing and what weapons could be doing to interact with the way the game is played.
Right.
So we created a rule first, and then we were like, how does this reflect anything that could actually be happening? And so we decided that these were Sonic weapons, because thematically that would set them apart from lasers and flamethrowers and that kind of stuff. So they're setting up vibrations that they're sending at you in some capacity, and they're pretty loud. They all have a name. Naming these was pretty fun. They all
You
have
guys
a
had fun
name
with
that
those, yeah.
indicates a sound.
Oh. So yeah, so we've got on the low end, you've got the Whistler.
Yeah.
So let's go over the Sonic rule itself.
Mm-hmm.
So wrench does damage, but each time the defender pays one or more tokens for a defense reroll when attacked with this weapon, they must pay an additional ace token.
Yeah.
So when they're spending their ace tokens on defense rerolls, these Sonic weapons make them pay another ace token. So if they're spending anything,
and it's future proofed in case there's ever a driver that lets you pay control to reroll or whatever.
yeah, if you
'cause it
pay
says
any tokens at
token on
all,
there.
yeah, if you pay any
Yeah.
tokens at all to get a reroll on their defense, then they also have to pay an extra ace token in addition to whatever they were spending
Yeah.
before. So
Now-
this is
now
partly
these-
to, and that
These
rule
do
is
not affect the range reroll. The range reroll is free still. You don't pay a token to get that range reroll, so
Right.
this does not apply to that.
yeah, it's not the range rule. This is just when they're spending their right now ace tokens to get additional rerolls.
Yeah.
And it is a somewhat counter to what some people have had an issue with, of people having really high ace token builds being hard to hit. Well, now they got to pay effectively double at least for those.
Yeah. Now you're also paying on your average damage potential with these. You're not paying very much. It's decimal points. But these are a little bit weaker than a normal weapon at their cost would be, because they're cutting into everybody's defense, right? If you're not building aces into your build and you're just maneuvering 3 times so that you have ace tokens to reroll defense dice with, these are still cutting into that.
Yep.
So we wanted to make sure that they weren't just I'm turning off everybody's defenses, and the people who are not building all the way deep into ace are being punished even more. So we dropped their average damage a little bit.
Yeah. And they are fragile. Like lasers,
And
these are
yes.
all 1 point weapons. 1 point
Yeah,
structure.
you can kind of think of durability as also thematically the technology level of the weapon, right? Because a slug weapon is just a standard. You put a big bullet in it, it fires that big bullet. It's a piece of metal flying at you at high speed. So those are a little bit harder to damage in the world of the game story than something that's relying on super high tech technology,
Lasers or
whether
sonic
it's
attacks.
yeah.
Same with a lot of electronic components and things like that have to be done. So, and then these are all wrenches do extra damage.
Yeah.
And so your 2-pointer there is 2 greens, which is a good couple of damage most of the time, and could be up to 4 damage.
Yep.
And pretty consistent. And all the rest of them at least have a black. The Old Yeller has 2 blacks. Big Whoop has 2 reds and a black and a white. Bench has 2 reds, a black, and a white. So they all have a lot of chances for those wrenches to come up. Again, they're making those faces not be blanks. They're also extra damage results.
Yeah.
So they're a little more. They may have lower overall totals, but they're a little more reliable in that you've got they have to spend more to reroll dice, so that makes them more reliable to hit, and they're a little more reliable on those dice coming up with damage results because all the wrenches are also going to count for damage results.
Yeah, when you see black and white dice, that means and a wrench equals damage result.
Yeah,
It means that more of the faces are good than bad.
yeah. And there are a few more. These aren't all of the Sonics, but these are a spread of the new Sonic weapons.
We put in a Sonic weapon at every point cost.
Yeah.
All the way from 1 to 8, because that's our point spread at the moment is 1 to 8.
But yeah, so the Sonics, again, they're a little more fragile, a little lower damage, but they've got some reliability built in there, both for the being able to hit and being able to put up the numbers that their ceilings will allow.
Yeah.
And then I think we don't have any additional weapon types. We have okay, this isn't exactly another not exactly weapon type, but this is something that came out in Sonic Strike. Let's see if there's more than one example of it here. Yeah, there's 2 examples of it here. And that is the armored weapons. So we've got a couple of these where they're an armored disruptor or an armored fire strike or an armored that. And it just means that these have can take additional hits, right?
Yeah, so originally there was an armored machine gun and I believe an armored recoilless rifle, and that just meant you were paying a little bit in damage, but you were getting more durability. So theoretically, over the course of the game, you get more attacks with that weapon because it would last longer.
Yeah.
So you're kind of stretching your damage out longer as opposed to getting more damage earlier on.
So instead
And
of
it's
like
not,
paying
it's
to put
not much.
Another low cost weapon on that side, you're just getting it in the weapon itself.
Yeah.
Let's see. I think the new weapons like the Banshee are asking you to buy another dice pack. They'll still work fine with the one you've got. It's gonna be more convenient, but no, none of these require an additional dice pack to use them. A second pack of dice is always convenient to have. Just because you'll be passing around less.
We try and keep in mind how many dice are in the set when that's why there's more yellow dice than anything else, because you're rolling yellow dice for your speed on defense and on maneuvers. And yes, sometimes you may need to roll a second die. Like if you have all of the ways to add blue dice to a weapon and it rolls blue dice,
right? Like if you had,
you're gonna have to re-roll a blue die.
Yeah, if you had the targeting computer and the crew member that adds a blue die, and you're using the armored firebolt here, you're gonna have to re-roll some blues.
Yeah, and I believe sometimes I can't remember. Are there 4 or are there 3 blue dice in a dice set?
There's 4.
Okay, so yeah, so the armored firebolt is rolling the maximum number of blue dice. And also, so if your opponent is also rolling various kinds of dice in their defense roll, you might have to roll all your dice, keep track of that number and then pass them a couple. So it's always fine to buy more dice. I mean, we appreciate you giving us money.
Exactly.
More dice, like I said earlier, more dice, more fun.
They're more fun.
But no, we try to keep in mind maximum dice rolls, because we don't want people being like, okay, I rolled 6 yellow dice, I got to roll 6 yellow dice again, I got to roll 7 yellow dice. Like, we don't want you to have to keep all that. But it's pretty easy if I'm rolling all the dice I have. Like, we have one dice set. If we have only my dice, and I roll all my dice, and I say, okay, I got a 6, I can just grab 6 damage tokens and then pass you all the dice, and then okay, 6 damage is coming at you.
Yeah.
Every shield you get makes me throw a damage token away, and then we resolve that damage. So there's ways to easily track it without trying to keep a number in your head while you're also hearing other numbers yelled at you and stuff.
Yeah. So folks watching, do you have any questions that we haven't covered on weapon types? Because we kind of covered all the printed subtypes and a few of the classes of modified weapons, like the armored weapons, the turreted weapons, the linked weapons. I think we've covered pretty much everything that is out there now, or is coming out soon.
We even talked about sidearms a little bit, but I want to save a real conversation about sidearms for
I
its
think
own
we
thing.
covered sidearms to a degree when we did the crew.
Yeah, I think you did.
Set. I would go back and look at that deep drive, and if we didn't cover them in detail, then we'll do a sidearms deep drive. And if you guys have a particular subject you want to go into, we can go ahead and look into those. Let us know here or on our Discord, and we can look into doing a deep drive on that.
And marketing wise, I'll just point out that dice sets are available on warehouse23.com.
Yeah.
Also, every starter has a full dice set. So if you own yellow or yellow red or blue green already and you buy purple orange, you're getting another dice set.
You're getting another dice set. Yep.
So, and if you got the original double ace in the Kickstarter, I think you got a bonus dice set with that. So like if you and your opponent both come with sets of dice, you generally don't have to pass dice back and forth between the two players.
Yeah. If you're both bringing your own, then you're good to go.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've covered all of our core weapon types, all the expansion ones, all of the stuff that's Sonic Strike's out now, and then the new set we'll do an unboxing later that goes into Gonzo gear and
the other two.
Albert's Advances.
Offensive
Ordnance.
Yeah. The Gonzo gear and Albert's Advances will be an interesting, because Albert's Advances is the previous Uncle Al set, but that'll be a fun stream to just go through and look at all the wacky out there, kind of like pushing the envelope things, or not even necessarily pushing the envelope, but just kind of like approach from another side sort of thing.
Well, the other thing about Uncle Al's and now Albert's Advances is it wasn't themed around a type, right?
Right.
Like the linked weapon pack was lots of linked weapons and other things. Dropped weapons was a lot of drop weapons and other things. Uncle Al's was a little bit of a catch-all. So there's some things in there that aren't necessarily in theme specifically with other stuff, and there were extra crew in there. So, right, the crew pack, which is lethal lineup now, which is I think in wave 3. The crew pack and Uncle Al's were the two ways to get new crew, except for Gonzo Gear and Sonic Strike also add new crew. So, like Uncle Al's was a way to get a little bit of everything of different weapon types and card types and stuff that didn't have to exist in a pack. So if you just bought a starter and Albert's Advances, you're going to get a sprinkling of other things without having to go out and buy the set that's themed
dedicated
around
to
that concept.
Thing. Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to thank you for dropping by and talking through all this with us. The first wave expansions, Sonic Strike, Aggressive Arsenal, and Tailgate Trouble, are available now. The second wave of single player packs, Gonzo Gear, Albert's Advances, and Offensive Ordnance, are available for pre-order now. And the next wave is coming. Also, some of the alternate rules that we talked about today are in the Car Wars Companion, which is also available now, which has also variant rules, scenarios, and all sorts of other things I think it's a really good expansion to have for the game.
It's mostly a scenario book, but it's also maybe this will trigger your brain to think of other things you want to try with the game. So it has alternate rules, it has new terrain types, it has all kinds of things to get your mind spinning on what you want to do with the game.
It's got a way to throw in like the weather dice for condition modifiers. It's got the bot rules if you want to have automated players playing on the table.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to do more, if it's just two and you want to do more than a duel, you can have a bot or two out there. That those rules will tell you how to run those, so that they will run without you making too many decisions for them. But yeah, it's a good lay on to everything. But that was our deep dive on weapons. There will be a few that we didn't cover specifically, but no types that we didn't cover that come
Yep.
in Gonzo gear. So that should be suffice. If you guys come up with more strategies or things you want to hear about, feel free to jump on our forums, talk about them there, jump on our Discord, talk about it there, or catch us the next time we do one of these streams and ask us a question. Thank you, Will. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. And next week we will be back, but not from here. Randy and I are going to be at Board Game Geek Con next weekend, or most of next week, including during the stream. So we are going to either come to you, depending on the internet situation, we'll find out once we get there.
Yeah.
We'll either
Cross
come
your
to you
fingers.
from the booth, or maybe we'll take you on a little walk around the hall and the convention, take a look at a few things. So catch us next week live, hopefully, from Board Game Geek Con. And
Cool.
we'll be back after that. So have a good one and take care, everybody. Talk to you
Goodbye.
later. Bye.